On this episode is a very special guest, Steve Maxwell. Steve has appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast on several occasions, or perhaps you may have come across him on Brian Rose's London Reel. So he was one of the very first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts in North America. He was one of the first people to introduce kettlebell training to North America. Steve Maxwell was also one of the first investors in the UFC. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may I introduce you, Steve Maxwell. For those that aren't familiar with Steve, Matt almost ran out of ink just going through the list of credentials for Steve Maxwell. So we will have all of that posted up so that if you're curious to learn more and you don't already know about Steve, well, you know, there'll be a whole lot more in the edited version of this as it comes out. But we're going to take it that those people that are listening already know somewhat of your background, Steve. But if you'd like, would you like to give us a bit of an executive summary as to what's brought you to this moment, Steve? So,
birth. You guys, you're making my earphones tight. Now, I've been around for a while. I started out in the fitness industry back in the 1970s, before it was even popular. Started training around 1964 and wrestled all through high school and Division I NCAA in college. And of course, it was an easy jump to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was one of the Gracie's first black belts in the United States. I'm currently 6th degree, which is probably one of 3 6th-degree black belts in the U.S. right now.
Wow. That's crazy.
I'm talking about Americans. There's plenty of Brazilians that have been at it before me. And I was traveling the world. I spent a lot of time in Australia. I was all over the place, you know, Sydney, and I was at Adelaide once, and was up in the Gold Coast and way out there in Perth and Canberra. Melbourne. I love it.
So apart from your illustrious sporting career, there's a real interesting backstory and lifestyle that you adopted somewhat later in life as well. So, of course, your involvement with the Gracies led to you being an initial investor in the UFC, and you ran your own gym for many, many years and had what you'd say is quite a traditional kind of life. And then a few years ago, you changed all of that. You sold all of your worldly possessions, packed everything into a 30-liter backpack, and started to see the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's called divorce, you know.
wasn't my choice.
Wow. But you had the big house, you had the big business, you had all of the all of those things that people.
Oh, the amenities, you know, the 2.5 kids and a 2-car garage and the American dream.
Yeah.
And, once I decided to sell the gym, I actually moved in a camper van. I lived in a camper van for 3.5 years. I drove across the continental United States 8 times.
Wow. Just,
you know, like a teenage kid. Here I was, a guy in his 50s, living like, you know, like a college kid. And once I started traveling, what do you do with your van? I mean, it costs a lot of money to park a van. And once I got on the road with my backpack, I couldn't see going back and living in the van anymore. So I sold it. You know, speaking of the power of the internet. And you're talking to a guy that didn't even have a cell phone until he was almost 48 years old.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. I still don't know how to use a laptop. I'm amazing with an iPhone or an iPad, you know. The Apple products are made for guys like me, technologically, deficient.
And how did you sustain yourself financially whilst you're traveling?
Well, I created a website and I started making videotapes. And I had a lot of different videos.
What type of videotapes?
Yeah, we've had other guests that have made good money out of doing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Check out the Las Vegas Fitness Hunter. We did a tongue-in-cheek kind of video where I show up to a hotel room in Las Vegas, and the girl answers the door. Oh, Steve Maxwell, you know, she's just a little robe. And then I proceed to put her through like a little workout, but it was pretty funny. and then the video has a flash of her duct taped and tied up in the closet.
Wow. It's a premium version.
Yeah.
Pretty risque.
You move that to fans only these days.
Yeah. It was a little risque, you know, but most of luckily this was before the cancel culture thing, you know.
Yeah.
Different world.
I'd have a few angry Me Too people jumping down my neck.
Oh, they're on their way now.
But,
You revealed it. They're on their way.
Yeah.
They're on their way. But after the camper van, I realized that there is money in knowledge, and I had tons of experience, been around for a long time. I had ran my own gym almost 2 decades, and had a chance to really expand my knowledge base and my expertise. And there's a lot of people hungry for information. So I started just doing these little seminars all over the place. And I would travel from place to place through invitation. Sometimes I'd contact people that I was interested in. And they'd set up like a seminar. And that paid basically for my hotel, my meals and such. And then I made the majority of my living doing online personal training, which I started almost 17 years ago. There's a lot of people that they don't need an in-person trainer, but they do need to be directed. And there's a lot of people that need accountability. Just knowing that someone's there,
that's what I do
looking
myself.
over their shoulder, looking at their diet logs, looking at their workout logs, basically wanting information and input, feedback on their workout programs and so forth. So I'd come up with workout plans and do ongoing supervision. Some people just wanted workout plans. Some people just wanted a consultation. And I have some people that, work out ongoing year round. And of course, when the COVID thing hit, I discovered the joys of Zoom. And that revolutionized my personal training. So now I've been doing live Zoom sessions for the better part of 2 years now. And that's great. I mean, with the way the Zoom works now, I don't see any reason ever to go back into the gym, to tell the truth. I mean, you can do so much and you can see an awful lot and really help people out without necessarily being there in person. I mean, sometimes explaining certain exercises, even if you demonstrate them, sometimes there's like some confusion, but for the most part, it's pretty easy. So I've actually done a couple webinars on how to do online personal training.
But it's quite kind of
people. There's a lot of trainers that like to get out of the gym and start doing stuff online.
Absolutely. Well, it is kind of amazing now that technology now means that people can access amongst the very best in the world in terms of knowledge, information, and personal coaching simply by switching on their iPad and talking with yourself. So it kind of makes me wonder in some respects, how the PTs at the local gyms are going to fare in the years to come. Those 24-year-old kids, perhaps, that don't have a wealth of knowledge and experience, that are chucking people on treadmills and on bench presses, and maybe the wrong people that they're throwing on those that equipment. How they will fare and how that industry will fare in the years to come as a result of all that we've experienced over the last year or so.
Well, a lot of gyms were forced out of business here in the United States.
Really?
A lot of the smaller places, yeah.
Really?
I know a number of people that had to close their doors. A lot of Ju-Jitsu schools were forced to shutter their doors. It's real sad. The big box gyms will be okay.
Yeah, even John Danaher with the New York, the John Danaher's death squad over there with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got some of the top guys in the world over there, and they were based in New York. They got shut down, couldn't train. Obviously, the close contact with grappling. They've literally packed up their entire organization and moved to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And there's been a ton of guys that have left California also because of how restrictive things were. and taxes and just the whole California scene right now. People are just leaving in droves, moving to Montana, Texas, Arizona, some of these states, Idaho.
Steve, you've been somewhat instrumental in the popularization of mixed martial arts over the last 20 or so years. And as that awareness of the sport has grown, you've been perfectly positioned to observe that. What are your takeaways from where the sport was, where it is now, and where it might be going?
Well, I was never into mixed martial arts as a sport.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned directly from Master Elliot Gracie and his 3 oldest sons, and of course I have to include Hoyce, who wasn't, he was one of the younger sons, but it was always a complete fighting system.
Right.
It was self-defense based first and sport second.
Mm-hmm.
The sport only began to become really, really popular within the last 10 years or so. But before that, Gracie Ju-Jitsu, the way it was taught by the Gracie family, was a complete martial art. It had strikes, kicks, punches, headbutts, elbows, you name it, finger pokes to the eyes, bite, takedowns of every type you could think of, both wrestling and judo. And of course, ground fighting, preventing people from punching your lights out. Everything was in there. So it was like MMA. That's why Hoyce did so well in those first UFC. Because the one aspect that everyone was unfamiliar with was the ground fight.
Yeah.
No one knew. Everything was pretty much stand up.
Yeah.
Striking, kicking, punching. And it was obvious that no one had a clue when it went to the ground.
Yeah.
And here was this skinny Brazilian kid, wasn't particularly strong, wasn't particularly athletic, but he had great technique and a lot of poise. And, he kind of revolutionized the whole world.
And you've mentioned before that one of the reasons why they didn't throw Hickson into the mix, into the early into the early UFCs was because they wanted to demonstrate that the smaller guy could win against the bigger guy.
That's correct. Jorge and Gracie, of course, these fights have been going on in Brazil for quite a few years. They actually used to have televised fights of guys basically doing, almost anything go.
Huh.
It was.
So in Brazil, it wasn't a new concept.
Veil Tudo, yeah.
No, not at all. In fact, it was so violent that there was a lot of protests to take it off the television. Wow. It was really crazy. Basically, 2 guys in Speedos would get in a ring and beat the shit out of each other.
Protesting about the Speedos.
Yeah, seriously, no gloves. But it's interesting. The Jiu-Jitsu guys seemed to dominate even the free fighting. And there was a huge rivalry between the free fighting guys and I'm trying to think of the Portuguese name for it. Not lucha libre, but they had a submission wrestling form. And there was a lot of rivalry between the Jiu-Jitsu guys and those guys.
Veil Tudo?
Vale Tudo.
Yeah, Veil Tudo.
Yeah.
No,
so it was real interesting to see that develop. And Jorge wanted to bring that to the United States. And in order to, of course, it was a big ad campaign for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
And he says, well, let's just see what happens when we throw all these disparate martial arts styles in a cage with no rules and see what happens. Let's see who walks out. And, in those days, it was a tournament. Hoyce would fight 4 times in one night.
What?
And
damn.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The first one was, he had 4 fights. And there was no gloves. Everything went. The athletes had a gentleman's agreement not to poke each other in the eye and not to bite. But you could strike you could strike testicles. You could do kidney kicks.
I hate getting hit in the testicles.
There was a number of guys that really took a lot of shots. You could pull hair. Look at the Hoyce's fight with Chemo.
Yeah.
Chemo Leopoldo. He grabbed him by the ponytail and wrapped his hand and Yeah, I mean, all fair game. But then, it was pretty violent. And a lot of people got pretty upset. And no one was allowed to wear gloves. The thinking being that the gloves protect the hands of the striker and make it harder for the grappler to secure his hold. So gloves impede the grappler, but they make it a little bit safer for the striker's hands. So, the grapplers are greatly impeded by those big, thick gloves as far as securing, chokes and securing grips and things like that. And that's how it went for 4. And then Senator McCain, who was in the pocket of the Boxing Commission, started raising hell about human cockfighting. And it sounded like he was going to enact legislation that they were going to pass to ban it and outlaw it. That's when Jorge decided to sell. Yeah. And he had already accomplished his goal. His goal was to showcase Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and he wanted to show people what happens when you don't really understand ground fighting. You can get in real trouble. Yeah. So Jorge sold his shares, and at the same time, I sold my, whatever shares I had. Yeah. And I didn't make any money, but I didn't lose money either. Yeah. And that was in its infancy. There wasn't a lot of money in those days. It was bought by a couple of different guys who kept, rebranding it. And then they came up with a set of rules to appease the Boxing Commission. Yeah. And now you see it as, 5-minute rounds, gloves, safety protection, no rapid punching, hits to the headbutts, point of the elbow, no up kicks, no kidney kicks. It's pretty much like kickboxing standing and submission grappling on the ground. Yeah. It's now it's become its own system of fighting. It's specific for winning points or winning rounds in the sport. There seems to be a couple of seminal moments when you talk about gym culture and MMA. Definitely that with MMA, it was that first UFC where it punctuated Western consciousness. And with gym culture, it was, pumping iron for a lot of people. It's still referred to this day. And you've seen this whole shift in popular culture now, very much. I mean, you can walk around any suburb in the Western world and there will be chicks that don't go to the gym wearing activewear. It's very much embedded in the public consciousness. Has it been interesting from your position observing that and at the same time, the contradictory behavior of most people in Western culture when it comes to eating and exercise and lifestyle? Well, it was really interesting because in the 60s, no one ran or anything, Yeah. I can remember the police stopping my brother and I said, "What are you guys running for?" That's how you identified a troublemaker. What are you boys up to? What are you running for? We were just preseason conditioning for gridiron football, and so it was unusual to see anyone doing that kind of work. But then, the aerobics phenomenon hit, the running boom. The 70s were all about running. And then the aerobic, dance aerobics became huge. And then step aerobics, low impact, spawned this whole big, huge gym culture thing. And then, of course, in the 80s, yoga became like the big thing. Everyone wanted to do, it started out with power yoga. And, every kind of yoga you could think of, someone was coming up with a new wrinkle. And right about the 70s, it changed from Olympic weightlifting to powerlifting. Yeah. All of a sudden, no one wanted Olympic lifting anymore. It takes too much skill to Olympic lift. It's a lot easier just to bench, squat, and deadlift. Yeah. So a lot of people were attracted to the raw power of powerlifting. Yeah. And then in the 90s, it was all about kettlebells. Yeah. Kettlebell this, kettlebell that, and the secret Russian training systems. and you were instrumental in introducing that to North America as well. Am I right? Yeah, I got sucked into the whole kettlebell movement like a lot of people did, Yeah. And thought it was pretty good stuff. But in retrospect, in hindsight, I saw it as a mistake. I don't think it's a very sustainable way to train. It's very hard on your body, a lot of wear and tear. Mm-hmm. Think about it this way. Think about tennis players. How much does a tennis racket weigh? Pretty light. Not much. But yet they suffer a lot of wrist, elbow, and shoulder issues for just swinging a tennis racket around. So what do people think is going to happen when they start throwing a 24-kilogram kettlebell?
That's really interesting.
Shoulders and wrists.
That's really interesting.
You know?
Yeah, but would you still implement that in workouts, and how much would you say is too much? Like, that's the first time I've heard that perspective, which I do agree with. I mean, as coming from my experience and my injuries that I've had in my life in sport. So how much would you implement kettlebell training? Like, for example, at the moment, I'm doing a fair bit of cross training at a CrossFit gym, and they include it possibly almost every second or third workout. So how much are you still doing any kettlebell training, or what's your general opinion on implementing that in exercise programs now? I
don't see any reason to do it at all.
Wow.
In retrospect.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a big change, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, big change. Well, because
that's it. They go on a marketplace.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'll sell my kettlebells, Steve. No.
I saw a lot of negativity. You know, a lot of the original people that started out around my time were started suffering a lot of overuse injuries. For example, my ex-wife, DC Maxwell, she was the third American woman to get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She was also a bronze medalist in the World Championships.
Wow.
And she wasn't fighting the Master Seniors. She was fighting young girl division. You know? She was older than most of those girls' mothers.
Yeah, wow.
And yet she took bronze. So the reason I mentioned that is I wanted to explain she was a very athletic woman who had been doing athletics all her life in combat sports and such. She was on the cover of Pavel's book, From Russia with Tough Love. She was the pretty blonde.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
She had a hip replacement surgery, which she blames in kettlebell.
Right.
Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah, she's 2 years younger than me. I'm 68, so that I won't say her age.
That's thoughtful.
No, she's 2 years younger than me.
Yeah.
She had to have hip replacement surgery. You know, Pavel Sitsoli, Mr. Kettlebell, has had his elbows operated on twice. I heard his CEO from Strong First, which is the mecca of kettlebell lifting, has had 9 knee surgeries.
Wow.
Brett Jones.
Jeez.
You know, it sounds like a litany of just all these horrible overuse injuries. And the reason is the speed and the explosiveness of swinging a kettlebell. And why do people do that? Because we've been fed a bunch of lies that moving quickly and explosively selectively recruits fast twitch muscle fiber. This is patently false. You do not selectively recruit fast twitch muscle fiber. You're working slow twitch through medium twitch, through fast twitch, just like you would anything else. As a matter of fact, if you really want to recruit the fast twitch muscle fibers, no movement is always required. Isometrics. I've become a big isometric fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much buggered up my right shoulder with the kettlebells.
Yeah, right.
Other things too. I can't blame just kettlebells.
Yeah.
You know, a series of wrestling and jiu-jitsu insults to the body.
Might have been the Kimura lock.
Yeah. But it all comes together.
Hours on the mat every day. I may have had a little bit
I
to
think
do
it's
with
kettlebell.
Being on the mat. But my point is, like, you accept injuries in boxing, Muay Thai, karate, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. You accept those injuries as a normal part of combat martial arts and sports. It's just par for the course. But in my opinion, your training should never cause an injury, ever. Proper training should prevent injuries. And the reason why an athlete would do strength training is so that he can do his chosen sport.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Now, here's the thing. I'm going to bag and CrossFit a little bit. It's pretty harsh. I mean, I don't know whether you've ever seen the guy that invented CrossFit, but the guy's
no one's seen
pretty
it.
bad.
Is he alive? Is he still alive? Is he still with us?
He's crippled.
Steve, I was
I don't know.
massively against CrossFit for a very long
10
time.
knee surgery.
That being said, my daughter is a huge CrossFit person. My daughter Savannah, oh my God, she just posted. She just deadlifted 335.
Wow.
Yeah, and squatting over 320, and
Kilograms?
benching over 205 pounds. So she's a strong girl. Yeah. I watched her climb a rope with her friend, alternating, no legs. I don't know, I don't know how many meters it is, but it's a 20-foot rope, no legs. Most guys can't do that.
No.
And, they were doing trips back and forth. She'd go, girlfriend would go, it was like,
geez, I want a friend like that.
Ninja Warrior, that's how it was won though.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of proud of my daughter. She is strong and she's very fit and she enjoys CrossFit. So I say, go into it with open eyes, but do realize it's not the best way to train for other sports. If you want to be a good boxer, you're better off doing general strength training and then practicing the skills of your sport to the absolute best that you can. In my case, I'm an old Ju-Jitsu guy. I do general strength training. When I say general, I mean just basic exercises. Push, horizontal push-pull, vertical push-pull, a squat, some type of deadlift, working your neck, forearms, maybe a little ab work, calves and shins. And that's all you need. You don't need to do fancy stuff. And I use slow, high-tension movements, nothing explosive, take care of my joints. And then to get skillful at Jiu-Jitsu, you get on the mat and you drill, you practice, you do all the things you need to do to be good. In your case with boxing, it would be, hit the heavy bag, the speed bag, top, bottom bag, do your head movement drills with your line, do your pad work with your coach, get in the ring and spar. That's how you get good at boxing. Going out and doing a lot of long distance running or sprinting up hills maybe help you a little bit. I'll tell you, you can do all the sprinting and running in the world and die like a rat in the ring, man. It's a whole different type of conditioning, Rope skipping might have a place just to work, get you used to bouncing and moving on your calves. But for the most part, you want to keep your sports training as specific as possible, near contest conditions as possible, and then just do a very general strength training. And if you're doing like a pretty bigger sport like martial arts or boxing or jiu-jitsu or MMA, you don't really need to strength train much more than once a week, twice a week at most, or you're going to burn out something awful. It's a big mistake a lot of people make.
Well, through all of these fads over the last 30 or 40 years, as you've been talking and have observed, we're now dealing with that first generation of people that are in their 50s, 60s and 70s who've done a bit of CrossFit, they've done a bit of powerlifting, they've maybe even donned the stockings and heading down in the 80s and done some aerobics. But so they've tried all of these things. And what do you say to those people that are now in their 50s, 60s and 70s that are now have done a lot of these things and may have given up or may just find it really hard to get around? What can those people do to get themselves into good shape so that they can see through their days with great mobility and in maximum health?
Well, the number one thing, of course, would be get your sleep together. Sleep deprivation is a worldwide phenomenon. And you cannot lose body fat. You cannot grow muscle. You cannot recover if your sleep is deprived. And it's just amazing how many people are addicted to the iPhones, iPads, computers, TV. And, they stay awake into the wee hours and then they can't sleep and then, they have to get up. So this has been a real chronic problem all across the world, but big time in the U.S., sleep deprivation. Number two, you got to get your diet together and you got to get your weight down. There's you can out-eat any exercise program. It doesn't matter how good the program is. You could easily out-eat it. Like 2 days of binging could undo like 2 weeks worth of dieting.
Wow.
So what's the best diet?
That's like
it's easy to get into. It's easy to get into. But the best diet is the one you can live with. Any number of diets work, but all diets work the same. Caloric deprivation. You must create a deficit somehow. And that can be a combination of lowering the calories and raising your activity, or just lowering the calories. And then the third would be some form of strength training. Absolutely essential for good aging. You start to lose that muscle mass really fast. And even if you do strength training, you'll still lose the muscle mass.
Yeah.
No one gets out of here alive. People must strength train. So sleep, get in a good diet, get the weight down, start strength training. And then, of course, you can do mobility and flexibility training on top of that. But if you do proper strength training, you actually enhance your mobility, enhance your flexibility. You actually improve it. And good full range squats, good hinging deadlifts, your push pull and so forth. And for people that are really jacked up from old injuries or arthritis, there's always isometrics. Isometrics are phenomenal. They're making a big comeback. It's so funny. They were huge back in the 60s when I was a kid.
Wow.
And then for whatever reason, like a lot of good ideas, they just kind of disappeared. Part of the problem is they're boring and they're not very sexy.
Yeah. Well, Nautilus don't have too many pieces of equipment to sell that suit isometrics either, so that might have something to do with it.
Might have something to do. Hard to make money in isometrics.
Absolutely. And
but it's a phenomenal way for older people to train. And there's a new type of isometric that was created. It's called Superstatics, or time static contraction. A mentor of mine is a fellow by the name of Ken Hutchins. He's had tons and tons of experiments with people, hundreds and if not thousands of people. And I'm convinced it's a very solid way to train for people that have arthritis or joint conditions. I work out my 84-year-old mother-in-law with this.
Yeah. As soon as you said that,
I've worked out.
Yeah. I
worked out a guy the other day that was like 91 years old.
Wow.
And he had a terrific workout, very safe, So it's a really good, viable option for people that can no longer lift weights or can't get to the gym or don't want to go to the gym. They want to work out in the privacy of their own home. So you have, but some form of strength training. It could be just body weight, push-ups,
for the people that are not exactly sure what isometric training is. So your isotonic movement is obviously when you're contracting and when you've got a resistance that you're resisting against with movement, and your isometrics that you're talking about is where you're not moving, but you are still having that resistance there, like pushing against a wall or similar, that sort of thing.
That's right.
Correct. And there's two types of isometrics. There's that type that you just mentioned, like pushing against an immovable object. It could be like a chain with a bar or a stick on it, or it could be a wall or, something like that. You could use a strap, just a regular, like a Ju-Jitsu belt or like some type of loading strap. That's one type. It's called overcoming isometric. And then there's the yielding isometric where you hold a measurable weight. For example, imagine you go to the top of a chin-up bar and hold for time. Or you do a half push-up hold with your arms bent about 90 degrees. Or a half squat or the wall sit. A lot of people are familiar with that. Where you slide down the wall with your top of your thighs parallel to the floor and hold for time. So, there's both yielding and overcoming isometrics. In the 60s, you used to hold a bar loaded with weight between two loading pins in a power rack.
Wow.
That's why that was why the power rack was invented.
Wow, that's so interesting.
It was invented for isometric.
Wow.
Isometric power rack. And you would have a lower pin and an upper pin. And you would load an Olympic bar with a particular amount of weight. You'd lift it a couple inches and hold it against the upper pin for time. And you would do various positions. Like maybe on Monday, you would work the extended position. And then maybe Wednesday, you work the mid-range position. And Friday, you work the near end range motion position. But with Superstatics, it was found that you get full range increase in strength by holding mid-range for time. That's usually when your arms are bent or your legs are bent about 90 degrees. You recruit all the available muscle fibers and you increase strength through the full range. And that mid-range is the weakest range anyway. Weakest range anyway. So by strengthening the weakest range, the entire range is strengthened. So it's interesting. Very safe. Good way to train. And you can mix it. You can mix and match. You don't have to do just one. I like to do dynamic stuff with body weight exercises mixed in with isometric. And there's certainly nothing wrong with machines. Machines have been vilified, but a well-designed machine can be fantastic. I'll tell you, for rehabilitating injured limbs, I defy anyone to rehab a knee without a leg extension, some form of leg extension. But it's really hard to work your neck, for example. But man, there's some awesome neck machines out there, like the Nautilus 4-way neck, Hammer 4-way neck, Pendulum 4-way neck, Med-X is a 4-way neck. It's a boon to any contact athlete, whether it be Australian rules football or rugby or soccer or any martial art, American gridiron football. You need to have a very strong neck. I mean, anyone that drives a car should work their neck. My girlfriend was rear-ended the other day.
Oh, wow.
A truck ran in the back of her car. She had to stop suddenly, and the guy wasn't watching, and boom, hit. And her neck was pretty jacked up. Thank God she had been doing neck exercise.
Oh, no, we've lost you.
What? So,
You're back.
yeah, no, a phone call started coming through.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
We're
So
all
it was
good.
coming
So
through
go
on
on.
my,
Oh, sorry.
So anyway, neck work is extremely important. But if you don't have a neck machine and neck harnesses you can use, but they're a little awkward, you can do isometric. Very easy.
They're being
This
persistent.
person.
He's too popular. You're too popular, Steve.
Steve hung up
No,
on
no,
me.
I think
I'll get the second
it's
time.
the Kettlebell Association.
That's
They're
right.
ringing up to have some words with you.
I hate to say it's my dentist. I'm getting some work done tomorrow. He's probably confirming.
Yeah. So you're 68 years old now.
Young.
What is your daily routine look like?
Well, I usually awaken pretty early in the morning, usually with the sun up. And of course, we're in the Pacific Northwest. We're pretty far north. So it stays light. It gets light really early and stays light till about 10:30 at night.
Wow.
We're in summertime now here because you guys are going towards winter.
Yes.
And does that
And,
regulate your
yeah.
daily routine in terms of when the sun goes up and comes down?
I try to
it's
go to
very
bed with the
seasonal?
sun and get up with the sun as
Yeah.
much as I can.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times I'll go to bed early and I'll just read for a while, you know, something spiritually uplifting or whatever. But I wake up, I do a whole routine of Qigong exercises, massaging the head, eye pressure points, massaging the eyes, temples, ear, drums of heaven, tongue exercises, throat, working the fingers, working the feet. Then I massage the abdomen. There's a whole iron crotch genitalia massage. It's all part of the Chinese system of Qigong.
I've got my
for
brush in the
keeping
shower.
Testosterone. So there's ways that you can massage the penis and testicles to keep potency and virility and so forth well into advanced age. And after I get through that little routine, I usually get up and I do what they call oil switching. Maybe you're familiar. Oil pulling.
That's really good for your teeth. Keeps them-
Yeah. Gums. Also
Yeah.
good for your whole body.
Yeah.
It pulls toxins out of your system.
Yeah.
And then I'll drink baking soda water, which is great for increasing NO2, nitric oxide, which helps carry the red blood cells to the body, helps with your whole breathing system, and very alkalizing. And then I fill up a 5-gallon bucket. 5-gallon bucket, I don't know how many liters that is, but it's a huge bucket.
20, yeah.
Yeah, at least. And I fill it up with ice cold water. And I go outside year round, wintertime, snow, ice, it doesn't matter. And I slowly pour it over my body to get that, what they call, to stimulate the diving reflex. And I'll do breathing exercises to prepare my body for it. And then you stand there for a while. And the feeling is one of heat, not cold. It's interesting. And then I briskly rub down with a dry, a really rough.
It's the Kettlebell Association calling again.
Yeah, he really wants to get a hold of me. So I'll do, after I dry off, I go back inside and do some more Qigong to warm up. And the 5 rites of Tibetan yoga, and usually hang. And then by that time, it's I'll take my first calories for the day, which will usually be some type of herbal tea.
Yep.
Sometimes a kombucha. Sorry, guys.
That's cool.
He really wants to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
Teeth are going to explode.
Yeah. And then after that, usually maybe a little coffee or tea, yerba mate, or I drink cold brew coffee. I like it.
Yeah.
It's just soaked organic coffee beans. I mix it with coconut water And then I go out and I have a nice walk with breathing exercises and so forth. Then I start my day with my clients. I go online. I look to see who's emailed me. It's still pretty early by the time all this is done. It's kind of like a lot of stuff, but I have it down where I can get it done pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then I'll answer a few emails. Maybe if I haven't walked earlier, I'll walk then. And then I'll usually go and I have Zoom sessions set up throughout the day. Yeah. I have 10-foot by 15-foot mats in the garage where I'll give Ju-Jitsu lessons. Or I go into a local school sometimes, help teach. I roll with a couple of kids like that.
What a great experience.
And then afternoon, a little bit more online. So I'm home a lot.
Yeah.
And it was perfect for me during this whole shutdown thing. Yeah. Everything was pretty much shut down.
Yeah, but what a dramatic culture shock from a global nomad to somebody who's now very much home-centered.
Well, you're going to laugh, but, I've used an astrologer for many, many years. And he had warned me about this whole shutdown thing.
Right.
Almost like a half year before this thing happened. And he just said, hey, early 2020, you're going to want to pull off the road, find up a place to hole up. He says, because you're a U.S. citizen, you'd be better off in the U.S. You don't want to get caught in a foreign country with your visa expiring. I read about this poor British couple that were on vacation that got caught up in that. And they ended up in the Maldives and they went through their life savings just having to pay the hotel bill.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They couldn't get back. They couldn't leave. They couldn't get back home. There was a number of people that got stranded, world travelers.
Yeah.
So I bought a tiny house in Spokane, Washington. Just a little tiny house.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I set it up on my girlfriend's mother's property. She has this 5 acres and it's way out in the middle of the Olympic Peninsula, very rural. I mean, I have like 6 deer in my yard at any given moment.
That's
raccoons.
Cool.
I mean,
raccoons.
I know squirrels by name. They eat. I got them so they're eating out of my hand. But there's been bears sighted in the neighborhood. There was a mountain lion sighted not too long ago.
Wow.
You hear coyotes at night howling, pack of coyotes running around. So, eagles. I mean, it's really quite a beautiful little wilderness area.
You picked a nice slice
and
of
we're
paradise.
right on Puget Sound. So as the crow flies, we're only about 35 miles from Seattle. But to drive here would take almost 3 hours.
Wow. So it's another world away.
As a peninsula. So most people would take the ferry, but even with the ferry, it's still like a 2.5 hour trip.
And
so we're isolated.
And what does your evening routine look like so you'll have a main meal at lunchtime?
Yeah, this is my chief meal.
Yeah.
I only have coffee, coconut water, some tea early. And then maybe a little kombucha now and again. And then the chief meal is usually around noon, 1 o'clock. And this usually consists of a protein, usually meat of some type. It could be elk, bison, venison, sometimes turkey, occasionally chicken, but always organic. And with a large salad, some vegetables. And, I don't mix starches and proteins together in the same meal. So it's a protein-based meal with vegetables.
And that's something you picked up from the Gracies with your time with the Gracies. Is that right?
Yeah, they would sometimes mix a starch and a protein, but I've been reading about food combining. It's called meal simplification, just to enhance your digestion.
Yeah.
The main guy I really liked was this Dr. Hay and this other guy, Dr. John Tilden. They were the turn of the century physicians that would use fasting and diet to heal their patients and not use modern drugs and so forth. So I read Toxemia Explained, and I adopted a lot of the dietary principles expounded by Dr. Hay and Dr. Tilden, and I found it worked great for me. And then at night, I will have carbohydrate or starch, depending, sweet potatoes maybe, or tonight I'll have chia pudding. Sometimes I'll have, Teresa will make me a paleo cake.
Aww.
It's made out of, almond flour. It's made out of almonds or sometimes chestnut flour. So it varies. Occasionally I'll have a cashew ice cream.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I'm very careful on the calories.
Yeah,
the cashew ice cream, a whole pint is 550 calories, which is right in line for my energy expenditure. And if the pants start getting a little tight around the waist, I will really pull back big time, or maybe even fast for a day or two.
See, I just go to the tailor at that point.
We need another inch.
That's right.
Can I quickly ask? I'm really interested in your opinion on the idea that there's kind of two schools of thought on flexibility and strength. So some people avoid flexibility with the old school thinking that the more flexible you are, then actually that means you can't put out as much power, that you want your muscles as tight as possible and everything as tight as possible to be as strong as possible. Do you believe that you want to be more flexible or less flexible to be stronger? And also, do you think it's different depending on what sport you're doing?
It completely varies depending on what sport.
Okay.
If you were, let's say, for example, you want to improve your powerlifting. Being tight and inflexible is a great boon to powerlifting. The tighter you are, the better you are. It's safer for you. And, I've seen some powerlifters that can't even do a bodyweight squat, but when they get like 500 pounds in their back,
Wow.
Yeah, they need the weight to be able
so
to
that type of tightness actually helps them rebound out of that bottom position. Whereas Olympic weightlifters want to be pretty flexible. You got to be, just basically throw yourself underneath the bar.
Yep.
Those are sports. In my game, Jiu-Jitsu, you want to be reasonably flexible. You don't have to be super flexy bendy. It's been my experience that the more flexible guys, the really, really super flexible people get hurt the most. It seems like you're more prone to injury. You get put in all these weird, wacky positions where you just don't have the strength.
Yeah.
So you get hurt.
Wow.
So, you want to be moderately flexible. You don't have to be able to do a split, but you don't want to be tight either. You don't have to do like a back bridge on your hands like a gymnast, but you don't want to be super tight at the same time.
Right.
So moderate flexibility.
Right.
Everyone should be able to touch their toes. Everyone should be able to do a full flat foot squat, butt to their heels.
So
that's what I call moderate flexibility. And, it's ironic because people that are kind of good at flexibility, you'll see them all in yoga. Like you'll see all the ladies, for example. Women tend to be more flexible than guys. They're always flocking to the yoga classes. It's not what they need. They should be in the weight room. And all those bro dudes on the bench press and curling the barbells, they should probably be in the yoga room.
Steve, with Jiu-Jitsu, you said you were an American collegiate wrestler. When did you first encounter Jiu-Jitsu and what made you fall in love with it so much?
Well, I was looking for something to replace wrestling. After I graduated from college, I had a degree in exercise science and physical education. I started teaching and coaching wrestling at a local school outside of Philadelphia. And I was just always looking for something to replace wrestling. I was still wrestling with the kids and I was doing some amateur wrestling, but, it was really hard to get like any kind of high level wrestling experience. And I didn't know about the Philadelphia Judo Club at that time. But a friend of mine taught me to go into a Russian Sambo club up in the northeast of Philadelphia. It was run by a Russian guy. And I loved Russian Sambo. It was like a hybrid judo wrestling. That was a lot of fun. But once again, a lot of the practices were right in the middle of a working man's day. What are you going to do? Yeah. And as I raised a family, I bought a house, I was working in a gym. It was hard to make these practices. So I kind of fell off the wagon for a while with the wrestling and jiu-jitsu. I started taking karate and I practiced Kempo karate. And I was doing some of that kind of striking martial arts. And then I heard about the Gracie brothers about 1988. And I went to their first seminar on the East Coast and I fell in love with it. And at that point, 1990, I had opened up my own gym, Maxwell, and I put a mat area in the back where I would invite my old wrestling friends. And then I heard of the Philadelphia Judo Club, and some of those guys would come over, and we would cross-train with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. And then it became so popular, I ran out of space, so I rented the whole upstairs floor.
Wow.
And this big old building that I was renting. It was like an old warehouse. That's cool. So I rented the second floor and just completely matted it out and started running jiu-jitsu classes. Of course, I wasn't qualified to teach at that time. You know, we called them practices because, you know, I wasn't really, you know, I was a blue belt. I mean, but I was the only game in town. Yeah. There was no Henzer Gracie. There was no John Donaher. There was no, you know, there was nobody. It was just me.
Yeah. Was this after
no Matt Sarah?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Was this after you'd spent time living with the Gracies over with Elio Gracie and all that? You came back to your...
I would go to California for a week, 2 weeks, because I owned my own gym at that point. So I could leave whenever I wanted. And I actually spent a month in Brazil at Elio Gracie's farm. But then I started bringing the Gracies to me, and they'd stay with me. Hoist stayed with me for almost a month and a half one time. I would bring the guys out for seminars. Hoist came and lived with me. Helson, the second oldest son of Elio Gracie, came and spent like a couple of weeks here and there. And then I started going to Hawaii and spending time with him. So it was back and forth. They would come to me, I'd go to them. In the meantime, at one point I had 250 guys training out of my facility. Wow. A lot of people to train with.
Sure.
Yeah. So it snowballed. And then a lot of guys started splitting off and opening up their own clubs.
Wow.
Over the years, you know. And then before you knew it, there was clubs all over the place.
Wow.
So it really was the epicenter of BJJ in North America for a time there, where you had people coming to you, you had the best coming to you, and then you were just attracting anybody that was curious to learn more about BJJ.
And it was pretty scary in those days because we got a lot of guys that wanted to fight. Because, you know, Jorge and Gracie had established the Gracie Challenge. He was willing to give anyone $10,000 to anyone that could beat them outside the martial art.
Wow.
Any other martial arts style. He would give them 10 grand. It was supposed to be, here's my 10,000, you put your 10,000, and whoever wins takes it all. But usually guys would come with no money.
Yeah.
That would be me.
Come with no money, walk away with a beating.
Walk away unconscious.
So, you know, they would just walk away with a beating is pretty much it. And we would get guys coming into us in exercise. And I used to say, wait a second, my name's not Gracie. I'm just a student. You know, I'm just, well, by that point I was a purple belt, you know, pretty capable. Purple belts, you know, that's getting up there pretty good. And I can handle myself. So we took on a lot of challenge fights, even at my gym exercise. We used to get guys in all the time. But by that point, I was getting towards my late 40s, and I just got tired of it, man. I mean, there was a real risk of getting hurt, you know, because these guys would try to take your head off.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of young blokes that were like just, you know, full of piss and vinegar and, you know, young and dumb and full of cum, ready to go, man. Can I say that on it?
Yeah, it's all done.
No,
it's done.
We'll just replace the third word with something else, you know, anything.
Absolute icons in the industry can get away
dumb
with
and full of enthusiasm.
That's the PC version.
That's the PC version. Apologies to anyone's ears that are burning.
To all of those that have offended, come back next week.
I had my designated hitters. I had some really tough kids that, you know, really knew their jiu-jitsu. And we would kind of take turns. You know, we had like a rotation. And
there was a system.
We would accommodate anyone that wanted to come in. But it was really interesting. You know, the fights always ended up the same way. Because I had college wrestling and sambo experience, and I knew all the judo throws, all the takedowns, and pretty decent on the mat. Usually it ended up with me taking them down. Usually mounting them or taking their back and just using open hand slaps until they would give up, and sometimes choking them out to the death. Almost never really a challenge against people that didn't know. Now, the tough guys that would come in were wrestlers, were judo players, or sambo players. Then you were in for a fight. Those guys knew enough grappling, and they mixed up with the strikes, very dangerous. We never lost, but some of the fights lasted a long time. I had one against this former NCAA Division II college wrestler. He was Division II champion. And man, I went almost 47 minutes with this guy before I finally submitted.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, I wanted to quit so bad, so many times. Because this guy, there's a few times he's really getting the better of me. I was I was 48. He was 22.
Oh,
I weighed 158 pounds. He was 210 pounds.
Incredible.
But the only reason I stayed with it was Hoist was there. And I was not going to give up.
Can't let him do it.
I wasn't going to give up in front of my hero.
the prestige of the family was at stake.
He wanted to see how I handled myself.
Incredible.
And so that was a rough fight, man. I had another one with a judo guy that came in. Real tough guy, man. Really tough guy. And so I mean, there were some tough guys that came in. But if they were non-grapplers, it was really easy. Yeah. Boxers, karate guys, taekwondo, we would just salivate. They just didn't know what to do. They had no clue.
After that spinning wheel kick, there was nothing.
Muay Thai guys knew how to clinch.
Yeah,
so they could be dangerous, but once the fight went to ground, it's pretty much done.
Well, Steve, undoubtedly you've got a wealth of knowledge and are a tremendous resource just in yourself. So whether people are out there and just wondering, how do I get my diet right? I need to strengthen up. Whatever it is that they need to do to raise their game to the next level, how can they reach out to you, Steve?
The website is called MaxwellSC.com. Maxwell, S for strength and C for conditioning. Yep. MaxwellSC.com. There's a contact information there. They can email and send a letter of inquiry. Let me know that they're interested. And I do have a few openings for some online training. So anyone that would like to get an assessment or even just do a phone consultation, they can contact me there.
Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. It's been really interesting to learn from you.
It's been great seeing you again,
really,
Steve.
Really fun, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks so much.
Hopefully I'll see you again.
We'll catch you soon.